Welcome to the Huddle Up Podcast, your go-to show for all things Broncos.
Once again, Broncos country, it is time to huddle up. I am Carl Dumler, and with me as always, we have Nick Kendell. This show's focus is all things that pertain to your Denver Broncos, with an extra focus on the NFL draft. Nick and I will continue to talk general Broncos news, but always have a focus towards team building. We still stand by our statement, though, that building teams in the offseason and playing armchair GM is just as fun as the actual games on Sunday. Follow myself on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, as well as follow Nick at Nick Kendell MHH. And of course, tweet us as much as you like and follow the podcast account Huddle Up Pod. You can also find ours and our co-writers' content at milehighhuddle.com, a part of scout.com, and an affiliate of Scout Media and the CBS Sports Digital Network. We know you listeners are as football and Bronco crazy as we are, so please give us a click and subscribe to us on iTunes, as well as iHeart, Stitcher, SoundCloud, CastBox, and Spreaker. Don't forget to share us on Facebook and Twitter. We wouldn't be here today without you listeners, so please take the time to rate and subscribe to let your voices be heard on how you enjoy the show. Well, welcome to the 20th episode of the Huddle Up with Nick and I. That is just crazy to think that we've done that many already, Nick.
Yeah, man, it's been a fun journey so far. I'm excited to see where it gets going and ready to get back into football, man. The dead period is horrible. We'll keep going over these roster overviews, and I'm already starting to watch tape. Every one of these episodes so far has given me an excuse to get a sneak peek a little bit at the 2018 class. So I'm excited for football to start. I'm ready for people to start hitting. It's awesome in Iowa City. I'll be right by the hospital, so when they have practices going on, I can kind of be paying attention to the guys running around and stuff. I'm talking Iowa football, of course. Not the Broncos.
Yeah, unfortunately, you and I are both St. Louis Cardinals fans, and they are not worth watching right now. So it makes this dead season even all the more pretty dead.
Yeah, the Rockies are doing. I pull for the Rockies when the Cardinals aren't great. The Cardinals are my local team, and I've never been a Cub fan. So
there you go. That's good. We can agree on all that.
Yeah.
But today, we are going to it's our 20th episode. We got to go big. So we are going with the big boys, the defensive line. As Nick would say on here all the time, where's the beef?
Where's the beef?
We got plenty of it for you today. And I'm just excited to really dig into these guys and see what we have now compared to last year, because there's a lot of changes. But first, let me tell you about Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Again, that's audibletrial.com/huddleup. Now, I have a big trip coming up this week. That's why we're kind of getting this out here a little bit early. And I'm going into enemy country in Kansas City. And, of course, I'm taking a little side trip to Manning's favorite city of Omaha. So lots of time in the car, and you better believe I will have about 4 books done by the time I get home because of Audible. So I'm very excited for that, and I already have my books picked out. All right, now back to the big boys. And, of course, let's start with the one guy we know for sure is going to be a starter this year, Derek Wolfe. What do you think about this guy?
Well, as Chris Harris is the ultimate Bronco for the Denver secondary, Derek Wolfe is the ultimate Bronco for the Bronco defensive line. I mean, he's just the dude. 6'5", reportedly 285 pounds, but they're saying that he's up to 305 pounds now. So an absolute mass and just a jerk on the defensive line. They've talked about coming in, they were expecting Bulls and Derek Wolfe to get after each other. And Derek Wolfe ripped into the reporter who talked to him about that. I was like, what? I'm not here to entertain you. So this is the jerk, the crazy defense. He's the Bill Romanowski of the defense, so to speak. Not as insane, but just the jerk. And you need those guys on defense. I just love that mentality. Derek Wolfe was also just a man amongst boys at the combine. Came in about 300 pounds there. He has 33 and a quarter arms, which is, decent length. It's not incredible or wow, but it's definitely decent length. Big hands at 10 3/4 inches. And he wasn't great at the 40-yard dash, a 5.01, just barely over 500. If you're getting a 300-pound guy running sub 500, that's special. But where he really was awesome was the agility drills. He ran a 7.26 3-cone, 4.44 20-yard shuttle, and also did 33 reps on the bench press. So strong guy, but he was in the top 80 percentile on both his 3-yard cone drill or 3-cone drill and the 20-yard shuttle. So just a very good explosive athlete. I don't think he gets enough credit for how athletic he truly is. And then you compare that with his toughness and his anger and his mentality, and he's one of the better defensive linemen in the NFL, in my opinion.
Agreed. Yeah, when he can stay healthy, and that's been a big concern. When we signed him compared to Malik Jackson, it was kind of between one or the other, and Malik wanted more money, and of course Derek Wolfe was the guy that was willing to take a discount compared to what he could get on the open market.
Just like Chris Harris.
Yep, like you said, he's the ultimate Denver Bronco. The guy that's willing to take the discount to stay here, and on top of that, just his attitude. I loved. I was reading something on Twitter. And they talked about, him gaining 20 pounds. And somebody asked the question of, where's one of Brady's children? Is one of them missing? Because could that be that 20 pounds? He's famous for telling Brady that he's going to eat his children. I think, was that the AFC Championship game? I can't quite remember which game
so. It was. Either that or that awesome snow game. Yeah,
I can't quite remember. But, yeah, that's just the kind of guy he is. But, again, if he can stay healthy, that's he's a great player on the field, but he's had 2 neck injuries now. We had the scary one, his second year in the league there during the preseason against, I think it was Seattle, and he went head on collision with another player, and he collapse at one point. They were getting on the plane to fly to a game, and I think he collapsed, and he lost a lot of weight.
Was by the team bus.
Yeah. So some scary stuff, and then this last year he had another neck stinger that kept him out of a couple games, and so that's pretty scary stuff. That's the kind of stuff that can get a guy thinking about ending his career, and some of that I worry about. But he's talked about he wants to play 12 years. That's his goal. Get one more contract after this one, have 12 years, have another Super Bowl, and then be able to say see you later, and walk out the door, and just feel like he's done everything he could while he was in the NFL. So I love that attitude. I love that he wants to be a top player and just be the attitude guy on the team. He's the one guy you just don't want to mess with at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And he didn't only tell Tom Brady that he was going to eat his children. He also said it to Phillip Rivers. One of my favorite quotes of any Bronco last season was talking about what Phillip Rivers said to not what Phillip Rivers said. What Derek Wolfe said to Phillip Rivers, and the quote was about Phillip Rivers: "Don't like him. Not the kind of guy I'd hang out with. Ever since I had told him I'd eat his kids, just hasn't been the same." So he's also a funny guy. He's got a little bit of a personality there. Just he's the jerk. And it's not like a bad thing. He's just, you have to have those mean guys, especially on the D line. That's not a place for nice people. You have to be mean, and he definitely embodies that.
Agreed. And I'm excited to see if he really did put on that 20 pounds, what that looks like. If he can really even anchor all the more, because, last year when he lost his playing partner in Malik Jackson, teams really doubled him a lot more. And, you put out an article on him of just how much of an impact he can still make, splitting double teams, just powering guys straight back into the quarterback, throwing guys off to the side. If you get a chance, Broncos country, go take a look at that article and just see how dominant this guy can be. But yeah, that's something for this year is we need to see that other side, to see somebody that can step up and take a little pressure off him so he can go make plays for us, because he is a guy that not only, he impacts both the pass and the run. He's one of those rare players. This last year, 2016, he graded out as the second best 3-4 defensive end in stopping the run and 9th against the pass. That's incredible. When you can find that kind of combination, because that's not easy.
Yeah, and he was even better in 2015, where he graded out as the number 1 run stopper and finished top 10 overall as a 3-4 defensive end. He's not, the most explosive pass rusher from the 5 technique position. He's not J.J. Watt. He's not a freak, but one of the top 15, 20 interior defensive linemen in the NFL, especially when he's healthy. Like you touched on, the biggest thing for him going forward for me is his health, because he does have a tendency to get dinged up, which, I don't fault him. the interior defensive line is the roughest place to play. I mean, those guards and those tackles double teaming those guys and trying to push them. I mean, it's nasty down there. But if he can stay healthy and not let that affect his play, or injuries ding him up, he can have an amazing season this year. And also, as you touched on, he was much better in 2015 because when you have a guy next to you like Malik Jackson or a healthy Vance Walker or even Antonio Smith, who was a very underrated pass rusher the Broncos had in rotation for that unbelievable 2015 defensive line, you have to have guys around. Defense, like we talked about the linebackers last week, they would have been better if they had more beef up front. It's very synergistic. You need guys around you help to make your job easier. There's very few guys who just by themselves can consistently make plays. Von Miller's one of those guys. Aaron Donald's one of those guys. J.J. Watt, when he's been healthy, has been one of those guys. Wolf is not one of those guys, but he is that next tier. Should be a multi-time Pro Bowler. That's the level that he plays with when he's healthy. And I just can't speak enough about him. I'm just hoping that they can get somebody next to him to help alleviate some of that pressure, give him some more one-on-ones or push the quarterback to him a little bit and just stay healthy.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now let's move on here just real quick to, we both love Derek Wolfe, but like you said, it's going to be a lot about who's his playing partner, who's on that other side that can really do something. And last year, that job fell to Jared Crick. We saw Vance Walker go down with an injury, who was supposed to be that guy who had really graded out well and was looking like he was going to be that next great defensive end for us. And, went down with his ACL tear during training camp. That was a tough day. I remember, I'm usually an, orange colored glasses kind of guy. That day I couldn't figure out a way that was going to end well for us. And part of that was having Jared Crick, a guy who is not really graded out great throughout his career. Been kind of a, hit and miss kind of guy, does well at times and fails at others. But, we keep reading on, he's put on a lot of weight. They supposedly put on about 15 pounds and got him pretty close to 300 now. At points he said he played last year at 275 pounds at that defensive end spot. No wonder people could run. Yeah. The Broncos have talked about it. They've been light. They were light last year, and Jared Crick was a big part of that. Teams just ran to that side of the defense, left and right. Him and Shane Ray on that side, it was not a good combination. And so what can you tell me about Jared Crick that maybe can give us some hope that this year could be different?
Well, Jared Crick was brought in meaning to be a depth player. He wasn't supposed to be the starter, especially in the base end. He was supposed to be the guy that comes in that third down, second and long, that offers just a little bit more as a pass rusher rather than a run defender. He does not anchor well. That's not his game. But due to injury, it happens, and just the defensive line not being deep enough, Goetz being a year away, all those things add up, and it just meant that Crick was not going to be utilized correctly. That said, there's a lot of people who are very much anti-Crick. I was last year in the role that he was in because he was getting dominated at the point of attack and getting moved off the ball. But this year, if he comes in and I think he's going to probably be mostly competing with DeMarcus Walker, but you have him in that sub rotation where he's going to get his hands up in the air. One of his best attributes is he blocks so many balls, but get his hands up in the air and, attack one-on-ones and get after the quarterback and play instead of, like 70% of the snaps, get him around 30 for the player that he is, along with him getting bigger and another year in the system and just hopefully better guys around him stopping the run.
No, I agree. And you'd kind of hinted at that of him batting down passes. He batted down 6 passes last year.
Yeah. Awesome.
And then on top of that, he had 3 sacks. So he does well as a pass rushing option. If we can keep him, like you said, in that maybe 30% snap rate, I think he could be that Antonio Smith for us from 2015. Like you said, that was kind of more his role that he was brought in for. And unfortunately, injuries always kind of force somebody into a new role, and you just kind of hope they can rise up to it. And he struggled with it. I will point out, though, this is an interesting stat. I could not believe this. I had to do a double take when I was doing some research for all this. Over the last 2 years, he is 4th in the NFL in run stops.
Wow. That's probably a quantity thing. Especially with him getting blown off the ball, if they're running at him, he's getting pushed back. He can still get off the block and maybe make a tackle 8 yards, 9 yards down, but he's not the stoutest, just anchoring there. So that might make sense. Also, just how many snaps he was forced to play last year.
Right. No, I agree. But I was a little shocked when I read it, just that he did make a few plays here and there. Like you said, it becomes a quantity thing. Derek Wolfe was the top guy over the last 2 years in run stops. So very underrated skill. Just kind of reminds us that we can have a stout run defense. If we can get that other side figured out, Derek Wolfe, if he can hold up, you got Von Miller, who graded out as, I think, the top outside linebacker against the run. I think that's right. We'll talk about that more next week. But you got some run stoppers on this team. You just got to fill out some of these positions here a little bit. But so you don't see Jared Crick being a starter this year?
If all goes well, absolutely not. If he is, there's something that either he did something that he didn't show on tape last year, or one of the young guys really disappoints. But I think both Kerr and Goetz have I'd put higher betting odds on them being the starters.
Okay.
At least by halfway through the season. Crick I don't see as the starter.
Yeah. No, and like you said, I think that would work out great if he could be in a rotation and come in and especially on those third downs, be that kind of guy for us. And just keeping everybody fresh. That was part of it last year. It wasn't even just that, Crick was forced into the starting lineup. There wasn't any kind of quality backup that you could sit there and say, hey, let's put them in to give him a rest. Adam Gotsis, we hope that he's a lot better this year, but last year he was nowhere near being ready, and he wasn't expected to be. He was expected to have kind of that rookie redshirt year, I guess you could call it. And he didn't really get that opportunity, he still kind of got it because he didn't play a whole lot of snaps, but he was forced into a little bit of a role too. So you hope that Crick can more be that backup that comes in and be a nice veteran on the defensive line for us.
Yeah, and he's also, I think he's fighting for a roster spot. I think he will make the team, but if one of the younger guys plays well and one of the maybe Walker or even Shelby Harris, who's on the roster, plays well, that can save the Broncos, I think, about $2 million. We'd have $500,000 in dead cap, but that could save some cap rolling over for next year. So I would say that he is definitely in a position where he needs to show this offseason. Not incredibly, but he has to do better than some of those young guys gnawing at his heels, and he could be off the roster. That would be
that'd be a little bit of a shock. I'll be honest. That would be one I wouldn't expect to happen.
I don't think it will happen. I don't think it will. But he's a very low dead cap, and he struggled last year, and we have some young guys. So that's assuming one of the young guys really shows up. I'm guessing it won't happen, but just considering how the roster's set up, it's a possibility. I think Walker's not going to flash enough for that possibility to happen, though.
No, I agree. All right, well, let's move on here because we got a long list of defensive line here. I didn't realize how many guys we have that have a real potential to make this team until we started doing this. And one of our new pieces that we brought in, because this was a huge issue last year. As much as people talk about the offensive line or quarterback play, defensive line play was a huge weakness last year. And so Elway, this is what he does. He says, I see a weakness. All right, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to put a little bit of money into this. I'm going to put a little bit of draft capital into this, and we're going to fix this issue. And one of the guys that he brought in, like you said, where's the beef? This is one of the big boys. These are the guys that, last week we talked about those off-ball linebackers talking about the big boys in front of them. This is one of them. And we have D'Amato Pecco, the nose tackle from Cincinnati, who spent 12 years there with them. And, this guy, he's just been a great locker room guy there in Cincinnati. He's been their team captain for quite a few years here and just brings some great leadership qualities that I think part of it of bringing him in is because DeMarcus Ware is no longer here. I don't think Bronco fans always fully understand exactly. I'm not trying to say most of you do, but we've lost a lot of leadership. Peyton Manning went out the building. DeMarcus Ware is now out the building. That's some huge leadership. Some of the best leaders that the NFL has seen in the last 30 years. And so, like I said, with having that huge void, here comes in Pecco, a guy who's a great locker room guy, guy that's going to push people to be as good as they can possibly be. He's going to be unselfish. I'll talk about that here in just a little bit more. But yeah, what else can you tell me about this guy?
Well, like you were mentioning, he is a veteran all the way through the word. 12-year veteran from Michigan State, and he is a big boy coming in at 6'3", 325 pounds. Very stout. He is older, 32 years old. Like we said, 12 years of experience. Ran a 5'2", 740, but he's probably not running that these days. And, just overall good athlete for his size. Signed him for a 2-year, $7.5 million. So actually a pretty decent contract. That's eating up over $4 million, or about $4 million of the cap each year. So that's a solid number. And he's more of a typical nose tackle. You're going to see him take a lot of double teams and play zero technique right over the center, or one technique in the gap, the A gap next to the center. He's probably going to be the base nose tackle. And I'm still hoping though that they will use him in a rotation. Like I said, he's getting older, and coming over to Denver, specifically playing in the altitude, big boys are sometimes going to be huffing for air a little bit more than they normally would. So it's imperative and more important for the Broncos than probably anywhere else to have good depth on the defensive line to keep those guys fresh and to keep them, at their peak performance so they can get after the quarterback and stop the run.
Now, I was going to ask you about this because I know you weren't very high on this signing when the Broncos made it. Just thinking that he's a little bit older. He's not really performed all that well. And part of that is a lot of people see that Pro Football Focus grade. What do you agree with what they're trying to say about this guy and that he's really struggled a lot, or do you see maybe that they don't quite understand what he's doing?
Well, I mean, it's probably a little bit of both. He's probably not doing as bad as the Pro Football Focus grades are saying, given what his assignments are, what they're asking him to do. But being honest, I haven't spent too much time breaking down tape of the Bengals so much that I only so many hours, and I'll break down the Broncos, but I'd like to break down Pecco, but I'm saving that for like preseason and stuff. That's what the coaches are going to do when they're breaking down, analyzing if those guys are going to make the team or not. But from what I saw with Cincinnati, he's a solid space eater, but given his age and just, the overall impact of playing defensive line for that long, it would not be surprising to see his body starting to wear down and not being as effective. I think he will be a solid player for us, especially if we use him in rotation. I'm all about that depth. Quality depth in the defensive line is imperative. That's kind of what you see what Seattle's doing right now. They're just loading up on different gadget kind of players for the defensive line, and it makes a difference. Their secondary gets all the credit, but I really think it's the defensive line is just as important to them. So yeah, Pecco, I think there's a little bit of truth to both, and just with his age, it's going to start to, he's on the downside. Yeah. Now, that said, you're absolutely right about him coming in and filling that DeMarcus Ware leadership vacuum. He's going to be a good voice on there. He's going to show those guys how to work, and you need those guys, especially in the locker room. Last year we had a little bit of divide between the defense and the offense, rumored at least. There's a little bit of tension, which when you're losing after winning the Super Bowl the year prior, that's to be expected. At least I'd be worried if it wasn't happening personally.
Yeah.
But yeah, just those guys want to win. You're not laying down and dying. But Pecco, the kind of new face, a new leader, and just showing everybody how to work and what it means to be a pro. And I'm excited to see him, and I'm hoping that he has a great year for us. Yeah,
no, I agree. And just a couple quotes that really stuck out to me about Pecco of Ray Maluga. This is what he had to say about Pecco, and this is what you do is you find people who have played with this guy, and you find out how much they respect him and think of him as this great leader and captain. And, Cincinnati players just didn't have enough good things to say about him. But this is what Maluga had to say about him. He said, "He has been a defensive captain for nearly a decade. He's the most unselfish person you'll ever meet. He thinks about others before he thinks about himself." And, that's perfect for the nose tackle position because it is about the least sexy position in the NFL. I'm trying to think if there's a less sexy position.
Maybe long snapper.
Oh, there you go. Oh, man.
I found the one.
There you
go.
Did it. Yeah. Okay, so there you go. Other than that, nose tackle, it's just, you don't get the big stats. You don't get the recognition. Many times you're more of a two-down player, so you're taken out on, the big plays that everybody wants to see somebody make some kind of play. He does things that, nobody else really wants to. Take those double teams I remember, I think it was Brandon Marshall talking about when Terrence Knighton was here. And he kind of said, Knighton came up to him and said, you know what, hey, I'm going to take on the double team. You go make the play. And, that play, that's exactly what happened. Knighton took up the double team, and here came Brandon Marshall shooting the gap and made the play in the run game. And that's exactly what Pecco's brought in here to do. Eat that double team, let those linebackers go make some plays instead of having a guard come up and take them out like we saw last year. And like I said, sometimes I don't think, and this is to remember, like Pro Football Focus, they are a good source, but they're not the end all be all of understanding exactly what's all trying to happen, because we have no clue. There's teams try to use players in different ways. And this is what Pecco had to say when he would see his PFF grades. He said, it sucks. It sucks sometimes if I do happen to Google myself. And players do this. They always say, I don't read that stuff, but they do. And he said, I read some stuff that people say. It sucks. But when I come to work and I get my grade sheet from after games and it's A+ and it's all good, then I'm like, they don't know what they're talking about, because my own team is giving me good grades. That's part of just being a nose guard, man. You just got to ignore the noise. And, I hope he's getting A+ grades for us. I agree. I think we need to limit his snaps a little bit, get him in that maybe 40 to 50%. I mean, he played 55% of snaps last year. But yeah, just kind of get him in a rotation and let him go make some plays for us too. He has a decent first step. He has some athleticism to him. The Cincinnati Bengals, they used him on offense last year. He had 2 snaps on offense, and they've used him a little bit in that fullback role. And I don't see that happening with the Broncos. We actually have a decent fullback. Yeah. So you don't want to take snaps away from him. But yeah, I think this is a decent signing, if for nothing else, in the leadership that he brings to the team.
Yeah, I agree. And also, don't want to limit the role of the big guys. We've always been saying, where's the beef? But with defenses transitioning more and more to sub packages, nickel, dime, big dime, 3-3-5 even, I really think that the nose tackle is starting to, it's a dying position. It really is. The offenses are getting more and more spread out. There's more and more speed, and it's not so traditional, pounded down the throat. So these guys are getting smaller, quicker, and more athletic. And these true 330-plus behemoths are starting to disappear. There still are good ones out there. Who do you think is the best nose tackle in football, Carl?
Oh, boy. I'm trying to think.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Yeah, I'll just run through some names. I mean, you got Hankins, who was a free agent this last year, Lionel Joseph, who was a free agent, Poe, who was a free agent. All these guys walked, and they're some of the better nose tackles in football. So what does that say about the value of the position itself? It just isn't up there. It doesn't rank with the 5 techs. It doesn't rank with the 3 techs or the edge guys or cornerbacks. It's a dying position, and it's very limited value. So getting Pecco to come in and play 40, 50 snaps and provide that leadership is big for us. He's got to produce, because he does have a decent-sized contract with some guarantees. But I think he'll fulfill a role, even not playing a huge, statistical impact for the team.
Yeah. I'll put out a different name. Brandon Williams of Baltimore.
He got paid. Yeah, he's good.
Yeah, he did get paid.
Yeah, he actually did. So there's my argument. But no, he's he's young. He's been healthy, and I didn't see him hitting the market. I think probably my favorite nose tackle right now is Snacks Harrison for the Giants.
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh, he's incredible. Undrafted. Yeah. So, but yeah, moving on. His name's Snacks. I mean, my God, he's a monster.
All right. Well, talking about you said those 330-pound guys. Well, this is another one that the Broncos brought in, and maybe this might be my favorite signing of the offseason. And he hasn't even really shown a whole lot on the field, but he just feels like that next cheap contract, big production kind of guy that Elway brings in.
Value signing.
Yeah, value signing. That is Zach Kerr. What can you tell me about this guy?
Well, he is only 26 years old and played his college football for the Blue Hens, Delaware, if you guys didn't know that. Not a big school, but he's a big boy, 6'2", 334 pounds. And for how he plays at that size is pretty impressive. He's actually got a pretty good little get off. He doesn't have the length that I love for the position. He's more of a bowling ball type rather than the big spider with a huge wingspan. But because he gets off so well and can play with good leverage and strengthen that speed to power, he gets strength from his speed to power when the ball snapped. He can really create some havoc on the defensive line. And I'm thinking they signed him for a 2-year, $3.25 million contract. But I agree with you. I think this definitely has the feel of being the value signing. I'm between that, and I think I have a little bit of hope for Edebali, just because going from the Saints to here and playing with Vaughn could really have an impact because he looks like a good athlete. But I'm excited for Kerr. He's good size and also coming from a cesspool of organization, at least on the defensive side. From a roster standpoint, the Colts have just been an atrocity. And he was able to make plays on there when he's not a lot of guys are helping him out around him. Like we talked about earlier in the episode, synergy is so important on defense. With the good cornerbacks, the pass rushers can get there quicker, vice versa. The defensive line stops people. You got better third and longs created. So it's just everything feeds off it. So now he can come in and he can feed off some of those other guys. And I'm excited to see him because I think he's got the athletic size and just right at that perfect peak age where he is, could break out this year.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, last year he was limited. He only had 4 starts, but he had 2.5 sacks in those 4 starts. And that's pretty good numbers. You take that out over a 16 game, and that's 10 sacks for a season. He won't get to that. I don't. Yeah, there's no way he's going to get to that kind of number. But for being a 334-pound guy, to have some of the pass rush ability that he does, and he's decent in the run game too. In 2015, he graded out as a top 30 interior defensive lineman. And again, why I love this signing, why I think this could be that great value that that Elway loves to find, and just really come in and be that no name that everybody's like, who is this guy? And so I'm excited. I think he could earn himself a starting spot easily. I have too high of expectations right now. I'm way, I'm gone. You're not bringing me back on this guy.
Tape can do that very quickly. I'm just saying, Tape can do that very quickly. We'll see what happens with him on the roster. I'm excited. I'm not as excited as you are. I don't think he's going to. I think he'll probably fill a Vance Walker role, but I don't think he's going to be Malik Jackson. That would get me excited. If I thought we had a Malik Jackson potential on the roster, that would be great. I mean, you need Vance Walker. Obviously, he's a huge important role for that Super Bowl defense. But I think there's another guy on the roster that probably has the chance to be that Malik Jackson roster filler. I wanted to read a quote about what Von Miller said about bringing in both Pecco and Kerr and just, addressing that where's the beef, helping those pass rushers get those third and longs. Von Miller said, "Have you seen those guys? Those guys are huge. Have you seen them? Pecco, he's athletic. We were working out today and I was like, yeah, he's going to be great for us. Just by looking at those guys, you can already tell they're going to be able to feel and correct some of those weaknesses that we had last year. The run defense was one of our weaknesses. We were still able to put together a pretty solid defense, but the run defense was definitely a weakness." So, I mean, Von Miller understands you need those guys stopping the run up front. And with Kerr and Pecco, that's almost 700 pounds added there between 2 guys. And that's going to be huge for the Broncos run defense, especially if they can stay on the field and stop those early downs.
Well, yeah. And I was just thinking in my head here, say Zach Kerr starts there at that defensive end spot. Jared Crick said that he was about 275 last year. You have Zach Kerr about 335. That's 60 pounds difference right there. Just on every play of him getting to anchor and actually be bigger than the guy who's across from him for the most part. And so that would be huge. Do you see him? I guess because everybody sees that 334 pounds and automatically assumes he's going to be a nose tackle. But you seem to be thinking of him more in that defensive end spot.
I'm thinking of him in both.
Okay.
I think he probably has a chance to do nose tackle and defensive end. I think he's going to compete and get snaps at both. But just like Walker, he played a fair amount of nose when he came in. Actually, a really high percentage. He wasn't the primary nose tackle. That was Sly. But he was able to do it and play in different sub packages. Like he can be a sub deep nose tackle, more of that one technique, shaded over the center. And I think he'll be very valuable there playing on the defensive line and creating a little more pass rushing pressure than Pecco will offer.
Sounds good. Like I said, I'm excited to see this guy and see what he does when the pads come on. He's a little bit more of a finesse player, even though he's kind of big, because he uses his quickness to win with that first step and really kind of shoot a gap. And that works great with what we have here on defense and what we're trying to do. But yeah, just have to see what he brings to the table, and hopefully he can be that next great signing that everybody's talking about. And on that note, now you had said that you thought there was maybe some guy who could be on this roster that could take over Malik. Is that Adam Gotsis to you?
Absolutely. Adam Gotsis. He is I'm not sure if he'll take that step this year, but from hearing about him at camp from my trusted sources, he has been the talk of the locker room, between the guys in the front office, just that they expect this guy to take a step this year because he has been pretty dominant on the field. Now, that might partially be because he looks like a completely different player than last year, and potentially the backup offensive line is not very good. He's been doing a lot of wrecking of the second team offensive line. But still, if he can come in and show that improvement, they say he has that superhero body right now, just because he's built he's worked so hard to trim down the fat and just get bigger. But if he can come in and just be a stout guy and play opposite Wolf, and with his wingspan, which is incredibly long, he's not Tano Passanio, who the Chiefs took in the second round, but he's got long arms and he can play with leverage. And one of my first articles for Mile High Huddle was Goats's piece when they played against the Patriots last year, and he had some ups and downs. But his main thing was he was getting blown off the ball pretty consistently because he didn't fire off the best, and he just, he looked a little weak and slow. Another year off the ACL injury after working out and working a little bit more with the technique. You're not a rookie anymore. You kind of have a little bit of a cycle, a schedule. It's not the whole draft process, which is, obviously overwhelming and different than any other part of the career will be for these guys. So now he's back in the things. It's football now. He's not doing so much of the rehab. Well, he is doing some of the rehab, but it's a different rehab. That's something we'll talk about. But I'm excited for him, and I think he's definitely has a huge chance to be a guy that can turn this defense around this year. We really missed that guy across from Wolf last year. In my opinion, the biggest missing thing next to the quarterback, I guess, on the defense. So I'm excited for him, and I hope that he can live up to that draft pick and the praise that I've been hearing about him. He's not going to come in and be J.J. Watt, but if he can take a big step, I'm stoked.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this was the thought when he was drafted, was year 2. This is where he would finally, hit his peak and start getting to going. And so I'm excited. Like you said, I've heard you talk about some of your sources talking about him, and has me excited for the kid. He was still kind of that, who is this guy when we drafted him? And he still is. He's still quite the mystery. He just doesn't have that huge football background coming from Australia. And I think I was telling you the other day, I think my brother-in-law might have actually played against him in Australia. He went over there for a big football tournament, and that was right when he would have been in high school. And so I think he was still just starting to pick up football. So I haven't gotten a hold of my brother-in-law to find out if that's true or not, but it would be pretty cool if it was. But yeah, so he's still learning football. Everybody needs to remember that there's a lot more to Gotsis. It's not just that he was trying to recover from an ACL injury. It was that he's just learning technique. He's just learning what it even means to play football. And so, yeah, if he can really turn on that light bulb, that's going to be huge for this year. And I loved watching him at Georgia Tech. Finally got a chance to go back and really see some of those games. And he is just a high energy, explode off the ball and just wants to go hit people. I love it. I love watching that kind of football play. He kind of reminds me of, and they've been calling him, I think, Derek Wolf Jr. Yeah, I think that's the nickname that he keeps getting. And I don't think he's to that level or anything like that, but I think he has that kind of attitude, when he feels comfortable with what he's doing. And you hinted at that. I don't think he felt that way last year. He didn't feel comfortable with what he was doing. He didn't quite know where he was supposed to be going or what his assignment was. And so, yeah, this year, maybe finally knowing the playbook and knowing the game a little bit better, he can finally allow that athleticism to explode on the field. Just something that I was looking at his final year of college before his injury hit. He was grading out as one of the top pass rushing defensive tackles. I've heard a lot of people talk about he's going to be our run stuffer. I think he's more than that. He was 4th at the time in college for grading out as a pass rusher. At the time, he had 181 pass rush opportunities, and he had 3 sacks, 12 hits, and 9 hurries, which means that he was on 13.3% of all dropbacks, making an impact on the play. That's pretty good numbers for an interior guy. So yeah, that's why I get excited to see what he can maybe do even in the pass rush game.
Absolutely. And I think just overall, he could be a gigantic, we didn't really have that for the off-ball linebacker last week where we were talking about guys who can come in and challenge the status quo already on the roster. But we have that on the defensive line of Adam Gotsis and him being a high round pick. I still think that this year probably is not the year where we're going to see, get an idea of who all Adam Gotsis is, because it's going to take a little bit for that technique. But I think he's definitely getting the body and the athletic training part down. And then as the year progresses, I'm excited to see more and more as he adds technique and just becomes more consistent from snap to snap, because it takes a little bit for those defensive linemen. I mean, we didn't see Derek Wolfe really pop until year 3 in the league. And I think that'll probably be the similar with Gotsis. So this year, if he's solid, that's going to be big for us. And I think going forward, he's a guy that has the potential to be a stalwart on the Broncos defensive line, a guy that might play up to a second contract. That's what you want with that second round pick. And I'm excited for him, and I'm hoping we can see a big step this year.
Well, one final question on him, and then we'll keep moving on here with some of these other guys. Does his latest knee scope set? Are you worried about that?
Absolutely, I'm worried about it. The one thing we absolutely have to talk about is that he has been injured. He had the ACL, and now he felt some discomfort and had it scoped. And, they said they found nothing, but still, he's a guy that so far it's been all promise, and he's been dinged up. And, you got to play through some injury. Not that he's not. He went through OTAs with that bothering him. He didn't have the scope until afterwards. He was out there still making plays on that knee. But, you gotta get on the field. And with him being young, not a huge sample size in terms of playing, especially, coming from Australia, I am just curious about how his body holds up to the grind of the NFL. So we will see. Hopefully the knee scope they found nothing. They said everything's good. He should be good to go by the start of training camp. But, you don't want that to be the norm. Starting to see that with Wolf already breaking down. So that's the nature of the game for the defensive line for some of these guys, great athletes. But with the amount of force that they take, the weird, awkward angles where they get hit, it takes a toll on the body. So hopefully he can stay out of the trainer room and be making plays for the Broncos defensive line this year. I think he will be the starter. But again, training camp's going to have to decide that.
Nope, I agree. And that's we're hearing about him make plays in OTAs where they don't have pads on. They can't really have, I don't know. It's kind of weird. They can have contact, but they can't have contact. It's kind of one of those unwritten, like, yeah, go ahead and hit each other, but don't tell the NFL that you hit somebody.
Yeah, they do wear some stuff. It's not like actual pads. They're like lighter, but They do have like some protection on. So it is, they're going through the motions. They're learning the offense, and they are seeing a little bit of one-on-ones. It's not going to be as intense as training camp will be, when those guys are fighting for spots. But, any sort of buzz is good news to me, especially for a guy that we don't have much film on from last year. So I'm excited to see him, and I hope that he lives up to some of the buzz that he's been creating.
Yep. No, I agree. And this is Elway. This is what he does. He looks into year 2, when he drafts players. He's not usually looking a whole lot for that rookie impact. I think there is some stat out there that the Broncos are 32nd ranked since 2012 of rookies having playing time. I think that's right. Anyway, so yeah, that second year is where he really sees those rookies being able to step in and make a huge impact for the team. And hopefully Gotsis is that guy. We need him to be that guy, for this defense to really get back to that 2015 level of being historical and, really carrying this team. But moving on here, because we still have quite a few guys to get through, we have a guy that they nicknamed Pot Roast Jr., and might be the biggest guy on our defensive line this year. Tyreek Jarrett, a guy from Pittsburgh is where he went to college, and he's 6'3", 340 pounds. What else can you tell us about this guy?
Well, I watched him on tape, and he didn't really explode to me, but he's almost 350 pounds, so that's not surprising. Monster, doesn't really have great change of direction. When he gets by his guy, if he wins his block, he's going forward, and I don't see him moving much sideways, to chase down a guy. You want those guys who are flexible in the hips, and that's not really him. But he was an undrafted free agent, so what do you expect? He has been very good at the point of attack at OTAs and on tape. That's at least what I've been told. And, just a mountain. He can take on double teams and be a gap plugger. And he's definitely got a chance to make the roster. I'm not sure that he will. He might be a practice squad guy year 1. But, again, adding that beef and adding some athletic competition and size to that position.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I watched him a little bit, and I honestly was not very impressed.
Nah.
I even saw him getting blown off the line sometimes because he kind of likes to stand up right at the snap of the ball. And so I'm sitting here going, these guys are talking about him really eating up space and holding his point of contact. And I'm going, man, I didn't see that in college. So, maybe Bill Kolar's gotten a hold of this guy, worked with him, already, gotten him firing off lower. And, maybe he can be that kind of guy. But, yeah, I'm more just by the college tape. Things change. The players change when they get to the NFL, and some for the better, some for the worse. But I'm seeing more practice squad for this guy than I am future starter or future role player on the 53-man roster. I don't know. Like I said, I wasn't all that impressed for a nose tackle. And especially, some of these guys, I'm sitting here going, are we changing back to more of a two-gap system?
Right. I think they're just looking for one.
Okay.
They just get that because they need to be able to do both. Hybrid scheme. You have to do both. And we could not do the two-gap last year. Yeah.
I don't know. We definitely brought in some more two-gap type players this year for sure compared to years past, where it really was about you attack this hole and you go. And, worked great in 2015 because we had guys who were winning their one-on-one battles. Last year, that was not the case. So I don't know. I'll be interested to see what this guy can do once the pads come on. And, like I said, maybe he has already – Bill Kolar's gotten a hold of this guy, and he's done that before with players, of made guys into stars that nobody thought could do anything. So, it'll be a great race. And he has a tough competition with a guy named Kyle Pecco. That's another guy, D'Amato Pecco's cousin. We got cousins on the team. We've had brothers on the team before with Champ Bailey and Boss Bailey.
Woo.
Yeah, that's those parents were setting their kids up for being all-stars.
Hall of Fame.
Yeah. So, but anyway, yes, we've had that before. And so we have these cousins. And Kyle Pecco, he's kind of that opposite kind of nose tackle to Jarrett. He is the type of guy that has that good first step. He likes to move sideways to sideways, wants to go make plays. His last year in college at Oregon State had 45 tackles, 4.5 for loss, 2 sacks, 2 passes defensed, and so was making some plays from that nose tackle position. And last year was kind of the talk of camp, if people kind of remember. Was he going to make the roster? And people kind of thinking he deserved a spot on the roster, and he did make it for the first week, if I remember right. We had who was suspended that first week?
Was it Wynn?
I can't remember. I can't remember who was suspended, but he made it for the first week, and then he got cut and put on the practice squad.
Yeah, I think it was Billy Wynn for some reason.
Okay, yeah, and he was always kind of that guy that was on and off. Kind of like you worried about Todd Davis and Brandon Marshall when they were getting cut and brought back on the team, and all those kind of things. That was Pecco for us last year. And but right now he has broken foot that'll keep him out to the middle of training camp. And do you think that's going to cost him his roster spot?
It very well could, and that's unfortunate for him. But he looks to me more of a 4-3 defensive tackle. He's not mammoth enough to be a nose tackle, especially at least it looks like with what we're trying to do there. And he's not really lengthy or athletic enough to be a 5 technique. So unless he, blows somebody out of the water in camp and whatnot, I think he's probably a practice squad guy or just an outright release. Just would be my guess.
Yeah, he's kind of, I don't know. Like I said, he's kind of that tweener. Especially when we're adding guys that are 330 pounds, and here he is at 305 pounds.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he fit better with Wade. I do think that with Joe Woods, he's a little bit more about adding that beef and not quite being as aggressive with the defensive line. He's more about letting those linebackers go make the plays. That's just my thought right now from what I've seen from him.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I don't know. We'll see. Like I said, if him missing training camp are part of it, you can't win a roster spot from the tub, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
As the old saying goes. But Well, we have one guy left here to kind of talk about real quick, and DeMarcus Walker, our draft pick. We've already talked about him. We already did kind of a deep dive into him before, so if you want to really listen to a deeper dive, we can get into that, or you can go back and listen to that episode. But I guess my question with him is, how many snaps do you think he's going to get this year?
Probably 30 to 40 snap, 20 to 40. It's going to depend on how he looks. That's a pretty big range, but it depends on how the run defense does to start and how he improves in his ability to be not a complete liability in run defense. So he's going to have to, be a little more stout and win those pass rushing reps to earn them over Crick if he's going to see the field very much. But again, we talked about like Goats last year didn't see the field very much. That's not totally foreign for us with a second round defensive line pick.
I guess this is what I set the over under for him. Bronco fans probably need to calm on how big of an impact he's going to make. Like you said, we kind of do this. Rookies don't play a whole lot. And especially with the depth that we finally have on the defensive line, I don't know how much he's going to see the field. But I said his over-under for sacks this year at 3. Do you think he's going to be over or under that?
Push. No, I think probably 3 is right where you want to be.
Yeah.
That sounds about right. So if it was 3.5, I'd probably go under.
Yeah.
I think he'll get 3. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's kind of a learning year for him. He is kind of that tweener as well. He's a little bit on that smaller side, fits more with what we had last year of the small guys, and needs to bulk up a little bit, needs to get on the Adam Gotsis training regimen of gaining that 20 pounds in an off season.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen right now.
I don't think he can.
Yeah.
He does not have that frame.
Yeah.
At all. He looks pretty maxed to me.
Yeah. And that's what you and I talked about before with him, is I just wonder how much more he can get. I think he's going to be more of that specialist kind of player. Malik Jackson, I've heard a lot of people compare him like, oh, he started out small and he got bigger, but he had a frame that really could add a lot of weight. That was the thing, is he came in pretty skinny to the league. And Walker, he's been a weight room freak there at Florida State. I think I told the story about how on spring break, when everybody else was going out partying, he went back to his hometown so he could work out in the gym all week. He's got a great attitude. I'm excited for the leadership that he brings, and just how I think he is going to push other guys, just to be at their best when they're seeing this rookie that's in there, outworking them in the weight room. So I'm excited for that side of it, and just to see how he can maybe grow and maybe find a little bit of a niche this year for him.
That's the dream. I mean, maybe he can be an Antonio Smith this year, but I think he's going to compete pretty well with Jared Crick for that role. So we'll monitor it in camp, but I don't know. Just wasn't my favorite pick. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he turns into a stud, but that was probably the most underwhelming pick from this draft. So the last 2 guys that we want to touch on quickly are Shelby Harris, who we just signed this offseason, and Billy Wynn, who we retained him. He played with us last year. Neither guy I'm expecting to make the roster personally. Shelby Harris is 6'2", 288. Billy Wynn's 6'4", 300. So they're more of a edge rusher. Well, Shelby Harris is going to be a little more of a heavy edge, and Wynn's more of an interior guy. But I'm guessing based on who we have on the roster, these guys are more camp bodies than anything.
Agreed.
What do you think, Carl?
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Shelby Harris, he's coming over from Oakland and didn't really make much of an impact, and they didn't have a whole lot at the defensive line position anyway. So if he can't make an impact there, I struggled to see that he can do that this year.
Yeah.
Maybe he finally hits his peak, but yeah, he's more of a camp body kind of guy.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a little bit of time left. I know we try to get it to an hour for you guys, but we always seem to go a little bit over. But I wanted to just touch on some of the defensive linemen in the draft that'll be next year. Some potential guys, maybe some of them will return to their senior years. But if you're a first, second round talent and you're a junior, I personally advocate you to go get that money when you can, because nothing's guaranteed, especially if you're going to be a first rounder. But we got Christian Wilkins from Clemson. He plays more of an end for them, but in the NFL, he's going to be a 5 technique, 4 technique, 3 technique type. He's not an edge rusher. Deshaun Hand from Alabama. Vita Villa from Washington, who's a big boy, who's a lot of fun to watch. Draymond Jones from Ohio State University. He's a high recruit, and he's getting a little bit more role and showed some athleticism last year. So talented guy playing for a big program is definitely one to keep an eye on. Dylan Mack, who looks to be a pretty strong, stout nose tackle. One of my favorites that I was really advocating to come out last year, who returned for his senior year. Good decision for him because he could be a first-round pick, honestly. I think he's that talented. Probably would have been a third-round pick last year, but as Derek Nottie from Florida State. Watching last year, the reason I was so versed with DeMarcus Walker is because I was watching Derek Nottie. He was my favorite player on that defensive line, was a game wrecker a lot of times. I'm not sure if he's a true nose tackle, but he's stout and he can really control at the point of attack and move guys off the ball. So he's a lot of fun to watch. Lowell Lutulele, who is the younger brother of Star Lotulelei of the Panthers, former first-round pick. Very stout nose tackle for Utah. Not quite the athlete that Star is. Star was a freak athlete for his size. Very good player. Lotulelei is going to be a good nose tackle in this league in a 0-1 technique type. Maurice Hurst, more of a 3 technique, a little smaller, from Michigan. And then a guy that I've watched a little bit of tape on recently, I think I might even do a Twitter series on him recently because I'm already starting to get ready for 2018, is Trenton Thompson from Georgia. He is a lot of fun to watch. He's not very consistent right now, but I think he was the number 1 recruit in all of football the year that he came out of high school. Very long, 6'4", 290 pounds, and just some agility and athleticism that you don't typically see with those kind of guys. Had me more excited than, I guess that's not true. Malik Jackson's athleticism had me really, or not Malik Jackson. Malik McDowell's athleticism had me really excited watching him. But he kind of reminds me just another one of those freak height, weight, speed guys for the position that can beat you in so many ways because he's so long and athletic and balanced and flexible and synonym. This is just a great athlete, and I'm excited to watch him this year. Do any of those guys? Have you seen any of those guys, Carl?
Yeah, I've seen Christian Wilkins. He was quite the record for Clemson. As much as everybody wants to talk about their offense and how great they were, man, they had some playmakers on defense. It's unfair what they have on that defensive line there. Yeah. And Vita Vea, I remember watching him because there was kind of some debate that he might come out. And so watched a little bit of him, and I saw him, before he made his decision to go back. Some people were mocking him to the Broncos. And again, another guy that's, for his size, is pretty athletic.
Yeah.
And of course, you've sent me stuff on Derek Nottie and Trenton Thompson, of course. And both those guys, just great athletes for their size, especially Trenton Thompson.
Yeah.
It just seems unfair sometimes what these guys can do. And we're getting some crazy athletes in college football. I mean, more than usual, I think. And the NFL is just going to see some major playmakers on that defensive line over the next couple of years. And I've watched a little bit of Lotulelei. There we go. Lotulelei. We got close enough. From Utah, because, again, he was another guy that was maybe going to come out that decided to go back. And a guy I liked, I wasn't as impressed as some people were. Some were going, oh, man, Broncos got to go get this guy. And I think it was more because of the name than the actual play on the field. So I think it was a good decision for him to go back. Another year, I think that could be really good for him to really hone in his game because he does have skills. He just needs to fine-tune it. Agreed.
Looks like a really good class. And we're not going to go there yet, but the 2019 defensive line class has 3 guys that I think could be top 5 picks. There's some freaks that are going to be true sophomores this year. You got Lawrence from Clemson, Gray from Michigan, and Oliver from Houston. So if you're a college football fan, look for those guys because they are going to be talked about a lot, and they're worth watching. All right, well, that will wrap up episode 20 of the Huddle Up podcast. Stay tuned for future deep dives into positional groups as we are 1 month away from training camp. So long away still, but we're going to get there. Bronco fans, make sure to keep checking back on Mile High Huddle for all your updates on camp and all other Bronco news. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH and myself at Nick Kendell MHH, as well as find our Denver Bronco articles on Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of Scout.com and the CBS Sports Media Network. You can follow the Huddle Up podcast by subscribing on iTunes, and for Android users, Stitcher, Spreaker, Cashbox, a lot of them. You can also follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at Huddle Up Pod. Again, please be sure to subscribe and rate us. It's so important for just the analytics of the site that you are subscribing and leaving us a rating, and we check those. We are here for you guys. We want to do stuff that you guys want to listen to because we love talking football with you guys. So just make sure you subscribe and rate us and talk with us. We love it. For Carl Dumler, I'm Nick Kendell, wrapping up the 20th episode, the Where's the Beef episode of the Huddle Up podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you next week for edge rushers and the best edge rusher, the best defensive player. The best defensive player in the entire NFL, Von Miller. So
love it.
tune in. Yeah, love it. Oh, my God. Love Von Miller. He's my boy. So, as always, go Broncos.
Mile High Huddle.